values together. That's what arrays are for, right? Now let's do it. Let's get started. So we have array of 1, 2, 3 and 69, right? So this creates an array containing 4 integers. An array is a fixed size collection of values of the same type stored in an order, correct? Then we have favorite number, right? Dot get or null. So what this means here is that this accesses the element at index 0. Arrays in Kotlin and almost every programming languages use 0 based indexing. The first element is at index 0, the second element is at index 1, the third is at 2, right, and so on. So index 0 gives us 1, index 1 gives us 2, index 2 gives us 3, index 3 gives us 69, right? So then we have get or null 4. What it means is that there is no element at index 4 in our array of 4 elements, indices 0 through 3, right? So instead of crashing with an array index out of bounds exception, dot get or null returns null safety. You can also access elements directly with squared bracket notation, right? But this will crash if the index doesn't exist. So use get or null when you are not 100% sure the index exists, right? This is the best for it. Then we have input in 0 until favorite number dot size. So what this does is that this checks whether the input is valid index. 0 until favorite number dot size, what it does here is that it creates a range from 0 up to the size of the array, right? For array of 4 elements, that's 0 until 4, meaning the valid indices are 0, 1, 2 and 3. The in keyword checks whether input falls within the range. Now what we do here is that why not just input is less than favorite number dot size? Because why we do not do this? Because what if the user type -1? That's of course less than 4, right? So it would pass the check, but -1 is not a valid index. By checking input in 0 until favorite number dot size, right, what we are doing here is that we ensure that the value is both non-negative and within the valid range. So all edge cases are handled gracefully here. And one key thing to know about arrays that they have a fixed size, right? They actually have a fixed size. Once you create an array with 4 elements, you cannot add a 5th element. You can change the values inside but cannot the number of elements. If you need a collection that can grow and shrink, where you can add and remove elements dynamically, you want a list instead, specifically a mutable list of. As we can see here, val number mutable list of 1, 2, 3. We can do numbers dot add, we can do numbers dot remove, right? So now it has 4 elements, now has 5 elements and now has 4 elements, right? Correct, right? So but we will get into list in more depth when we talk about loops and collection. For now, arrays are fixed size and 0 based indexing, and it uses get or null for safe access. And that professional developers do not assume that indexes always exist, because users can type random thing, like literally random thing, right? And APIs return weird data, arrays may be empty, database may fail, so safe access prevents crashes. And as we see here, that step by step that we put read line here that reads text from keyboard. Then we have, but user input is always a string, so 3 is not actually integer 3, it is a string, right? Then we have to int or null. This tries converting string into integer, right? If conversion succeeds, then 3 is 3, right? Integer from string to integer. If conversion fails, then hello is null, right? This is very safe without crashing anything. Then we have validating index, force checks, So we have to check whether the user entered the valid number or not, right? We have different various sizes of check and understanding its sizes, correct? And I talked about the in keyword. So what in keyword does here is that it basically means that it is input inside, that the input is inside, what the input is, that it is inside valid index range, correct? It asks a question that is input inside valid index range. This is the question it asks. And why not just do this? Some beginners write that input is greater than favorite number dot size, right? So that looks okay, but it is wrong because -1 is less than 4, that is true. But it is invalid, right? Of course, negative indexes do not exist. So this check is incomplete. This is what array is all about. Then we have the final code flow, that if input is not equal to null and the double and operator, input in 0 until favorite number dot size, and then we have println your number is $this, and else we have println that index doesn't exist, meaning if user entered valid number and index exists, then what it will do is it will print array value. Otherwise, of course, it will show error message safely. So what array teaches you a very important programming concept, that managing collections of data. This becomes foundation for loops, algorithm, data structure, recycler views, API responses, databases, almost everything in software development. So don't just memorize the syntax, right? Understand indexes, bounds, safety accesses, safety checks, validation, collection behavior, because beginners and most weak developers assume that data is always valid, and meanwhile on the other hand, strong developers protect their code from invalid input and edge cases. Now let me just give you a brief about arrays and lists before we go on, right? So arrays has fixed size, slightly lower level and ordered collection, as we have seen in this topic, right? And meanwhile, what lists are, there are mutable lists, which means that it has dynamic size, can add and remove elements, and more commonly used in modern Kotlin apps, especially Android development. What I mean by dynamic collections in lists are that, now suppose you want collection that grows and shrinks, right? As I said already. And the arrays, then arrays are not ideal in this case. That's where mutable lists of comes. That's the role of mutable lists. So what we do is, what we add elements by numbers.add. So now list becomes 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if we add another thing, we add another 5. Now it becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's dynamic in size and can be changed anytime. That's why it is called mutable list software, because it can be changed. The variable can be changed here. And now on the other hand, when we talk about removing the elements, what we do here is that we remove elements by doing the variable name and then we use the dot remove, right? So for example, if we want to remove numbers dot remove 2, now list become 1, 3, 4, 5. So unlike arrays, lists can grow and shrink, of course, right? And in array, meanwhile in array, you cannot suddenly add an extra element. You can change values but not the size. So arrays always have fixed size, and meaning once it is created, it won't be able to change. So it is immutable perfectly, right? And everything should be handled gracefully, no crashes. Most Android developers, most proest and real developers does things like this, right? As we saw in the final code flow, that if user entered valid number and index exists, that prints array value, right? And otherwise it shows error message safely. And that's all for this topic. So let's move on. Alright, so far we have been writing code that runs from top to bottom once, right? But what if you need to do something multiple times? What if you need to ask the user to enter numbers over and over again? What if you need to process every item in a list? That's where loops come in. That's what loops are for. And we will start with the while loop. So we can see here I will write fun main println, right? How many numbers will you enter? Of course, because we want to take input from the user, right? So we will use readline dot to int on null, right? Val num0, val I0, and we will use while.